Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. My phone buzzed on a Wednesday morning in March 2024, right when I was pouring my second cup of coffee before heading to the accounting firm, where I had been crunching numbers for the past 6 years. The name on the screen made me nearly drop the mug. Danielle Voss. I had not heard from her since the summer after we graduated from college together in 2015, almost 9 years of complete radio silence. We had been inseparable throughout our entire 4 years at the university, the kind of friendship where people assumed we were sisters. Then came the fallout. A messy argument over a guy I was dating at the time, words that cut too deep, and suddenly she vanished from my life like smoke dissolving into air. I stood there in my kitchen, steam rising from my coffee, staring at the message notification. My cat Luna rubbed against my ankles, oblivious to the way my heart had started pounding against my ribs. The message was simple, almost painfully so. Hey Meg, I know it's been forever. I've done a lot of growing. Would love to talk if you're open to it. I spent the entire workday distracted, making small errors on spreadsheets that my supervisor Colleen had to point out twice. My coworker and closest friend Diane noticed something was wrong during our lunch break at the little sandwich shop across the street from our office building on Garrison Avenue. I showed her the text, and she raised an eyebrow, chewing slowly on her turkey wrap. Diane had heard all my stories about Danielle over the years, the good ones from college and the ugly ending that had left me crying for weeks back then. She asked me what I was going to do, and I told her I did not know yet. Part of me wanted to ignore the message entirely, to protect the peace I had built in my life here in Richmond. I had my routine, my apartment with the exposed brick walls that I loved, my book club that met every other Saturday, my parents just a 2-hour drive away in the suburbs. But another part of me, the part that still remembered laughing until my stomach hurt with Danielle in our cramped dorm room, wondered if people really could change. By the time I got home that evening, I had convinced myself that one conversation would not hurt. I typed back, "Hey Danny, I'm open to talking." We met that Saturday at a coffee shop downtown called the Copper Kettle, a place with mismatched vintage chairs and the smell of fresh pastries baked on site every morning. Danielle was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug. She looked different than I remembered, thinner with her dark hair cut shorter just above her shoulders, and there were faint lines around her eyes that had not been there before. When she saw me, her whole face changed, lighting up with a warmth that caught me off guard. She stood up and hugged me tight, holding on for just a beat longer than felt natural. I noticed she smelled like lavender, the same perfume she used to wear back in college. We sat down and she immediately started talking, telling me about the past 9 years in fragments, a failed engagement, a move to Denver that did not work out, therapy that helped her understand why she had been so possessive and jealous back then. She used those exact words, possessive and jealous, and she looked me right in the eyes when she said them. I appreciated the honesty more than I expected. She told me she had thought about reaching out for years but was too ashamed, too afraid I would reject her. The conversation lasted 3 hours. By the end of it, I felt like I was talking to someone familiar and new at the same time. The Danielle I had loved, but softer, more self-aware. She asked about my life with genuine curiosity, wanting to know about my job, my apartment, whether I was seeing anyone. I told her I had been dating a guy named Spencer for about 8 months. Nothing too serious yet, but it was going well. She smiled at that, said she was happy for me, though her eyes flickered away for just a second when I mentioned his name. I did not think much of it at the time. We exchanged numbers again, and she asked if we could do this more often. I said yes. Walking back to my car that afternoon, I felt a lightness in my chest that surprised me. Diane called me that night to ask how it went, and I told her it was good, really good. She was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line, then said she was glad but to be careful, Old patterns have a way of coming back, she said. I laughed it off and told her Danielle had changed. Looking at it now, I wish I had listened to Diane more carefully. I wish I had paid attention to that flicker in Danielle's eyes when I mentioned Spencer's name. Over the next few weeks, Danielle became a constant presence in my life again. We texted every day, sometimes dozens of messages back and forth. She wanted to know what I was doing, what I had for lunch, how my meetings went. At first, it felt nice, like having that close friendship back, the kind where someone actually cares about the small details of your day. She started showing up at my apartment with little gifts, a candle she thought I would like, a book by an author we used to read together, homemade cookies wrapped in wax paper. One evening she arrived with a framed photo from our sophomore year, the two of us at a Halloween party dressed as characters from some movie we had been obsessed with. I hung it on my wall because it seemed rude not to, and her face lit up when she saw it there. She began suggesting we spend more time together on weekends, and when I mentioned I had plans with Spencer on a particular Saturday, her expression changed for just a moment. It was quick, a tightening around her mouth, but she recovered fast and said of course she understood, maybe another time. That night she texted me 17 times between 9 and midnight, just checking in, just wanting to chat, just wondering if I was having fun. Spencer noticed before I did. He brought it up one Sunday morning while we were making breakfast at his place, cracking eggs into a bowl, while I sliced bread for toast. He said Danielle seemed intense, that every time he came up in conversation she got this look on her face. I told him she was just adjusting, that she had been through a lot and was probably lonely. He nodded but did not look convinced. A few days later, Danielle asked me to have dinner with her on Friday night, and when I told her I already had plans with Spencer, she went quiet. Then she said she was worried about me, that Spencer seemed controlling, that she had noticed how much time he demanded from me. I was stunned. Spencer was the least controlling person I knew. He encouraged me to see my friends, never checked my phone, gave me space whenever I needed it. I told Danielle she was wrong, that she did not know him well enough to say something like that. She apologized quickly, said she was just looking out for me, said she did not want to see me get hurt like last time. Like last time. The guy we had fought over 9 years ago. I felt something cold settle in my chest, but I pushed it down and changed the subject. The isolation happened so gradually that I almost did not notice it. Danielle started making comments about Diane, little things that seemed harmless at first. She mentioned that Diane had given her a strange look when she stopped by my office one afternoon to bring me lunch. She said she overheard Diane making a sarcastic comment about her in the break room. She wondered out loud why Diane seemed so possessive of my time, why she always wanted to have lunch with me, why she texted me so much. The irony was not lost on me, but Danielle delivered these observations with such genuine concern that I found myself second-guessing my own perceptions. One day she told me that Diane had said something cruel about my appearance behind my back, something about how I had gained weight and looked tired lately. I confronted Diane about it, and she looked at me like I had lost my mind. She swore she never said anything like that, and the hurt in her eyes was real. I believed her, but the damage was already done. Things became awkward between us after that. Diane started keeping her distance, eating lunch at her desk instead of inviting me to the sandwich shop. I told myself it was fine, that friendships went through phases, but part of me knew exactly what was happening. Danielle was cutting away the people around me, one thread at a time. Then the strange things started happening at my apartment. Small things at first. I would come home and find a window unlocked that I was certain I had locked. My mail would be sitting on my kitchen counter instead of in the mailbox downstairs. One evening I found a coffee mug in my sink that I had not used, still warm, with a faint ring of lipstick on the rim that matched the shade Danielle always wore. I called her and asked if she had been in my apartment, and she laughed and said, "Of course not. Why would I think that?" But something in her voice sounded amused, almost pleased that I had noticed. A few days later I came home from work and found a new throw pillow on my couch, a deep burgundy color that I had never seen before. When I mentioned it to Danielle the next time we talked, she smiled and said she had bought it for me as a surprise, that my building manager had let her in because she had explained she was my best friend and wanted to do something nice. She said it so casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I did not know how to respond. I thanked her, but my voice came out thin and strange. That night I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that this was all just her being thoughtful, being a good friend. But I kept thinking about that coffee mug, the warmth of it, the lipstick on the rim. Things got worse at work too. I started noticing Danielle's car in the parking garage across from my office building. A silver Nissan with a dent on the rear bumper that she had told me about weeks earlier. The first time I saw it, I thought maybe she was visiting someone nearby or running errands in the area. The second time, I felt a knot form in my stomach. The third time, I watched from my office window on the 4th floor as she sat in the driver's seat for over an hour, not moving, just staring at the building entrance. When I texted her asking what she was up to, she replied immediately saying she was at home doing laundry. I looked back out the window and saw her phone light up in her hand inside the car. She glanced down at it, typed something, and my phone buzzed with another message, a photo of a laundry basket with clothes in it. She had that photo ready. She had prepared for me to ask. That evening, she called me, her voice sweet and concerned, asking if everything was okay because I had seemed distant lately. I told her I was just stressed with work, and she offered to come over and keep me company. I said no, that I needed some time alone. There was a long pause on the line before she said she understood, but her tone had shifted into something flat and cold. She hung up without saying goodbye. Spencer and I had a fight that weekend, our first real argument since we started dating. He told me he was worried that Danielle was not healthy for me, that he had done some searching online and found her social media accounts from Denver. He showed me the posts, dozens of them about a woman named Christy, someone Danielle had described as her best friend out there. The posts started warm and affectionate, then became accusatory and bitter, filled with comments about betrayal and abandonment. The final post was a photo of Christy's house with a caption that read, "Some people don't deserve peace." Spencer asked me if I saw the pattern, and I wanted to argue with him, wanted to defend Danielle, but the words would not come. He said he thought I should stop seeing her, cut contact completely before things escalated further. I told him he was overreacting, that he did not understand our history, that Danielle just needed support and patience. We went back and forth until he grabbed his keys and left, saying he could not watch me do this to myself. I sat alone in his apartment for a long time after he walked out, scrolling through the screenshots he had sent me, reading those posts over and over again. Christy. I wondered what had happened to her. I wondered if she had seen the warning signs too and ignored them, just like I was doing. The breaking point came on a Monday evening in late April. I had left work early because of a headache that had been building all day, a dull pressure behind my eyes that made it hard to focus on my computer screen. When I pulled into my parking spot at the apartment complex, I noticed the light was on in my living room window. I had not left any lights on that morning. I sat in my car for a few minutes, my keys gripped tight in my fist, watching the window. A shadow moved across the curtain. Someone was inside. I called the building manager first, a tired older man named Walt who lived in the basement unit. He answered on the third ring and told me he had not let anyone in today, that he had been out running errands most of the afternoon. I asked him about the time he let Danielle in before with the pillow, and he went quiet. He said he never let anyone in, that no one had asked him to. My throat went dry. I called the police next and waited in my car until they arrived. 2 officers in a cruiser who walked up to my building with their hands resting on their belts. They went inside and came back out 10 minutes later. The apartment was empty, they said. No signs of forced entry. But they had found something on my bed. A stack of photographs, maybe 30 or 40 of them. All pictures of me. Me walking to my car. Me sitting at my desk through the office window. Me and Spencer at the Italian restaurant we liked on Franklin Street. Me sleeping in my own bed, taken through the gap in my bedroom curtains. The officers asked if I knew who might have done this, and I said the name out loud for the first time like it was a confession. Danielle Voss. I filed a police report that night and applied for a restraining order the next morning. The process was exhausting and invasive, requiring me to document everything. The texts, the lies about Diane, the car in the parking garage, the items moved in my apartment, every small violation I had brushed aside for weeks. Danielle did not make it easy. She showed up at my office 2 days later, crying in the lobby, telling Colleen that I had abandoned her, that she did not understand what she had done wrong. Security escorted her out while I watched from behind the glass door of the conference room, my whole body trembling. She sent me emails from new accounts after I blocked her number, long rambling messages about how we were meant to be in each other's lives, how no one else would ever understand me the way she did. The restraining order was granted after 3 weeks, and I moved to a new apartment on the other side of the city, a place with better locks and a security camera at the entrance. Spencer and I worked things out. Diane and I slowly rebuilt our friendship over coffee and apologies. I still check the locks twice before bed every night. I still look for silver Nissan cars in parking lots wherever I go. Danielle never contacted me again after the order was served, but sometimes I search her name online just to see where she is now. Last month I found a new social media profile she had created. Her most recent post was a photo of a woman I did not recognize, tagged as her best friend, with a caption that said, "So grateful to have found my person." I stared at that picture for a long time, at the woman's smiling face, and I wanted to warn her. I wanted to reach out and tell her everything, but I did not know how to explain it, how to make someone believe that the person standing next to them with that warm smile and those thoughtful gifts was already mapping out the walls of a cage. So I closed the browser and tried to forget, but I never really do. Anyone who graduated from Jefferson High in 2011 probably remembers Darren Foley. He was the guy who made everyone laugh during assemblies, the one who could talk his way out of detention and into any party worth attending. We played basketball together since middle school, shared our first beers behind his parents' garage, and swore we would be friends forever the way only teenage boys can. When he called me out of nowhere last March, saying he had hit rock bottom and needed a place to crash for a few weeks, I did not hesitate. My wife Lauren had concerns, but I told her this was Darren, my brother from another mother. I had a spare bedroom, a stable job as a project manager at a construction firm, and what I thought was an unbreakable bond forged over 15 years of friendship. Saying no never even crossed my mind. The first week went exactly how I expected. Darren showed up with a single duffel bag and the same crooked grin I remembered from high school. He was polite to Lauren, helped with dishes without being asked, and spent most of his time sending out job applications from my living room couch. We stayed up late a few nights, drinking beers and reminiscing about old times. Remember when we snuck into the Riverside pool after hours? Remember when Coach Patterson caught us skipping practice? It felt good having him around, like reconnecting with a part of myself I had forgotten existed. Lauren even admitted she had been wrong to worry. "He seems like a good guy," she said one night after Darren had gone to bed early. "Maybe this will work out fine." I remember smiling at her, feeling proud that I could help an old friend while proving that my judgment about people was sound. That pride would become the thing I regretted most. The shift happened gradually, so slowly that I almost missed it. By the second week, Darren stopped cleaning up after himself. Dishes piled in the sink, his dirty clothes appeared in random corners of the house, and the guest bathroom developed a smell that made Lauren gag every time she walked past. When I mentioned it casually, he laughed it off and said he would get to it later. Later never came. Then the job applications stopped. I noticed because the laptop I had lent him sat untouched for days, the screen dark, while Darren spent hours scrolling through his phone on my couch. He started sleeping until noon, sometimes later, and would raid the fridge at 2 in the morning. I know because the noise woke me up more than once. Lauren stopped saying anything positive about him. She just gave me this look, the kind married people develop after years together. the one that says I told you so without using words. Week 3 brought the first real argument between Lauren and me. She wanted Darren out. I wanted to give him more time. He is going through something, I said. You do not just abandon people when they are struggling. She reminded me that we had agreed on 2 weeks maximum, that our savings were not infinite, that the grocery bills had nearly doubled since he arrived. I accused her of being heartless. She accused me of being blind. That night, Darren overheard us fighting through the walls. Our house was not big, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood outside of Nashville, and the next morning he apologized with tears in his eyes. He promised to do better, to find work within the week, to respect our space. I believed every word because I needed to believe it, because admitting I was wrong meant admitting that the Darren I knew in high school no longer existed, and I was not ready for that funeral. The promises lasted exactly 4 days. I came home from work on a Thursday evening to find 2 strangers sitting in my living room. They were both men, late 20s maybe, with the kind of hollow eyes that come from too many sleepless nights and bad decisions. One of them had a neck tattoo of a snake swallowing its own tail, and the other kept bouncing his knee in a way that made the whole couch vibrate. Darren introduced them as buddies from a job he had worked last year, said they were just hanging out for a bit. Nobody asked my permission. Nobody acknowledged that this was my house, my space, my furniture they were putting their feet on. Lauren was still at work. She had picked up extra shifts as a nurse at the county hospital, partly because we needed the money now, and I remember being grateful she was not there to see this. I asked Darren to speak with me in the kitchen, and he came along with this annoyed expression on his face, like I was being unreasonable. "These are my friends," he said. "What is the big deal?" I told him the big deal was that he could not just invite random people into my home without asking. He stared at me for a long moment, then shrugged and said, "Fine, whatever. They will leave soon." They did not leave soon. Those 2 men stayed until past midnight, and when they finally walked out the front door, I noticed that a bottle of whiskey I kept in the cabinet, a gift from my father-in-law, a 20-year single malt I was saving for a special occasion, had been emptied and left on the coffee table. I did not mention it to Darren that night because I was too tired to fight, but something had changed in the air of my own home, a tension that had not been there before. Started locking my bedroom door at night, something I had never done in 6 years of living there. Lauren noticed and asked why. I lied and said I had read an article about home security, that it was just a precaution. She knew I was lying. I could see it in the way she looked at me, the way her jaw tightened when Darren walked into the room the next morning. We were both holding our breath now, waiting for something we could not name, and the walls of our little house seemed to shrink a bit more every day. Darren started testing boundaries in ways that felt deliberate. He would walk into our bedroom without knocking, claiming he needed to borrow a phone charger or ask a quick question. He began making comments about Lauren when she was not around. Nothing overtly threatening, just observations that left a sour taste in my mouth. "She looks stressed lately," he would say. "She should smile more." Or he would mention how nice she looked in a particular dress, then hold eye contact with me a beat too long, like he was waiting to see if I would react. One evening I found him standing in the hallway outside our bathroom while Lauren was showering. He said he was waiting to use it, but the guest bathroom was empty, and he knew that. When I confronted him, he laughed and called me paranoid. "You are acting crazy, man," he said. "I have known you since we were 12. You think I would do something to your wife?" He made me feel like the problem, like my instincts were betraying me. That is what people like Darren do. They twist reality until you cannot trust your own perception anymore. Lauren gave me an ultimatum on a Sunday morning in early April. "Either he goes or I go," she said, and I could see she had been crying before I woke up. She told me things I had not noticed or had chosen to ignore. How Darren had made comments to her directly when I was not home. How he had stood too close in the kitchen once, blocking her path to the door, and only moved when she raised her voice. How she no longer felt safe in her own house. I wanted to defend myself, to say I did not know. But the truth was uglier than that. I had suspected something was wrong and done nothing because confronting it meant confronting my own failure. That afternoon, Lauren packed a bag and drove to her sister's place in Memphis. She said she would come back when Darren was gone, not before. I stood in the driveway and watched her car disappear around the corner, and the silence she left behind was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I went back inside with every intention of telling Darren to leave. The words were rehearsed in my head, firm and final. "This is not working out. You need to find somewhere else to stay. I am sorry, but you have to go today." But when I walked into the living room, he was not alone. The two men from before were back, plus a woman I had never seen, skinny with dark circles under her eyes and fingernails bitten down to raw pink. They were drinking my beer, watching my television, and Darren sat in the middle of them like a king on a borrowed throne. He looked up at me and smiled, not the crooked grin from high school, but something harder, something that had no warmth behind it. "I heard Lauren left," he said. "That is too bad." She seemed nice. The way he said it made my stomach turn. I told him we needed to talk in private, and he waved his hand dismissively. "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my friends. They are practically family at this point." The woman laughed at that, a high-pitched sound that bounced off the walls. I said it anyway, right there in front of all of them. I told Darren he had to leave, that I wanted everyone out of my house by the end of the day. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Darren stood up slowly, and I noticed for the first time how much bigger he had gotten since high school. Not fat, but thick, solid in a way that made me aware of my own average build. He walked toward me until we were standing close enough that I could smell cigarettes on his breath, a habit he must have picked up recently because he never smoked when we were younger. "You are kicking me out," he said, more a statement than a question, "after everything I have done for you." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it, but the look in his eyes stopped me. There was nothing there I recognized. No friendship, no gratitude, no memory of shared history, just cold calculation and something that looked a lot like contempt. He shoved me then, both hands flat against my chest, hard enough to send me stumbling backward into the wall. The back of my head hit the corner of a picture frame, and I felt a sharp sting followed by something warm trickling down my neck. The next few minutes became a blur of noise and movement. One of the men grabbed my arm while the other blocked the front door. Darren stood in front of me, breathing hard, his face red with an anger I did not understand and had done nothing to deserve. "You think you can just throw me out like garbage," he said, "after I lost everything. After my own family turned their backs on me. You were supposed to be different." He hit me then, a closed fist to the side of my face that sent white sparks across my vision. I tasted copper and felt one of my teeth shift in a way teeth should not move. The woman on the couch had not moved at all. She just watched with empty eyes, like this was something she had seen before and would see again. I managed to break free from the man holding my arm, and pure survival instinct sent me running toward the back of the house. I made it to the kitchen, grabbed my car keys from the counter where I always left them, and went through the garage door. I heard Darren yelling behind me, heard footsteps on the concrete, but I was already in my truck and reversing down the driveway before anyone could reach me. The last thing I saw in my rearview mirror was Darren standing at the edge of my property, arms at his sides, watching me flee from my own home. I drove straight to the police station with blood drying on my collar and a bruise already swelling beneath my left eye. The officers took my statement and photographs of my injuries, and two of them accompanied me back to the house an hour later. Darren and his friends were gone by then, but so were a lot of other things. My laptop, Lauren's jewelry box, the emergency cash we kept in the bedroom closet, even the television. The place looked like it had been ransacked by strangers, which I suppose it had been. I filed a report, changed all the locks, and spent that night at a motel because I could not stand to sleep in those rooms alone. Lauren came back 3 days later, and we held each other in the empty living room without saying much. The police eventually found Darren 2 weeks after that, picked him up on unrelated charges in a town about 40 miles south. I never saw him face to face again, never got most of our things back, never received an apology or explanation. What I got instead was a restraining order and a hard lesson about the distance between who people were and who they become. Sometimes I still think about that kid from Jefferson High, the one who made everyone laugh, and I wonder where exactly he disappeared to. But then, I touch the small scar on the back of my head, and I remember that wondering is a luxury I can no longer afford. My friend Danielle texted me out of nowhere in March of 2023, after almost 6 years of radio silence. We had been close in college, the kind of friendship where you spend every weekend together and swear you will be bridesmaids at each other's weddings. But life happened. People drift, and by the time my 20s were behind me, Danielle had become just another name I sometimes thought about when old photos popped up on my phone. So when she reached out saying she had rented a farmhouse in rural Tennessee for a weekend getaway and wanted to reconnect, I felt a strange mix of guilt and excitement. She mentioned she had gone through some rough years and was finally in a good place, that she missed the old days and wanted to gather a few of us together. I said yes almost immediately, thinking it would be nice to see her again, maybe make up for lost time. Looking at it now, I realize how desperate the whole thing sounded, but back then I just saw an old friend reaching out. The drive from Nashville took about 2.5 hours, mostly on smaller roads that got progressively emptier the further I went. Danielle had sent me the address and told me to ignore my GPS for the last stretch because it would try to take me through a flooded road. I followed her directions instead, turning onto a gravel path that cut through dense woods and overgrown fields. The house appeared suddenly after a bend, a 2-story wooden structure with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch that sagged in the middle. There were no other cars in the driveway. I checked my phone and saw it was almost 4 in the afternoon, so I figured maybe I was the first one to arrive. I grabbed my overnight bag and walked up the creaking steps, noticing how quiet everything was out here. Not even birds or insects making noise. Danielle opened the door before I could knock, and she looked different from how I remembered her. Thinner, with dark circles under her eyes and hair that seemed like it had not been washed in days. She hugged me tight, maybe a little too tight, and said she was so glad I came. I asked her where everyone else was, and she waved her hand dismissively and said they were running late, that Courtney had texted saying she would be there around 7 and Bree was coming from Memphis, so probably even later. I did not know a Courtney or a Bri, but I assumed these were friends she had made after we lost touch. The inside of the house smelled like dust and something faintly chemical, like cleaning products that had been sprayed too recently. Danielle gave me a quick tour, showing me the kitchen with its outdated appliances and the living room, with mismatched furniture that looked like it came from different decades. She pointed upstairs and said my room was the second door on the left, that I should get settled and come back down for wine. I remember thinking the place had a weird energy, not in a supernatural way, just in the way that abandoned spaces feel when someone tries to make them livable again too quickly. I went upstairs and found the bedroom, a small space with a single bed pushed against the wall, and curtains that blocked most of the natural light. My phone had 1 bar of signal, sometimes 2 if I stood near the window. I texted my sister to let her know I had arrived safely, and she responded with a thumbs-up emoji before the message took almost a full minute to send. When I came back downstairs, Danielle had already poured 2 glasses of red wine and was sitting on the couch with her legs tucked under her. She patted the cushion next to her and started talking about how much she had missed me, how the years after college had been hard for her in ways she could not fully explain. I listened and nodded, feeling bad that I had not reached out sooner. She asked me about my life, my job, whether I was seeing anyone, and I gave her the basics without going into too much detail. The whole time she kept refilling my glass, and I noticed she was barely touching hers. Around 6:30, I asked if she had heard from the other girls, and Danielle checked her phone with a frown before saying Courtney had just canceled, something about her kid getting sick. She said Bree had not responded to her last message. I felt a small knot forming in my chest, not panic exactly, but discomfort at the idea of spending the whole weekend alone with someone I barely knew anymore. I suggested maybe we could reschedule, do this another time when everyone could make it, and Danielle's face changed in a way that is hard to describe. It was like watching a mask slip for half a second before she caught herself and smiled again. She said no, that was silly. We were already here and it would be fun, just the two of us like old times. She reached over and squeezed my hand, her fingers cold and dry, and told me she had been looking forward to this for so long. The way she said it made me feel like I owed her something, like leaving would be a betrayal. So I stayed, and I poured myself another glass of wine because I did not know what else to do. By 8, the sun had gone down completely, and the house felt smaller somehow, the shadows in the corners deeper, and the silence outside more oppressive. Danielle had made pasta for dinner, a simple dish with garlic and olive oil, and we ate at a small table in the kitchen while she talked about people from college I had almost forgotten existed. Then she brought up Nathan, and everything shifted. Nathan had been her boyfriend during junior year, a guy she was completely obsessed with until he broke up with her right before finals. I remembered it vaguely because she had been devastated, crying for weeks and barely leaving her dorm room. What I did not remember, and what Danielle now told me with a flat voice and unblinking eyes, was that I had apparently been the reason they broke up. She said Nathan had told her he had feelings for me, that he wanted to be with me instead, and that I had known about it and never said anything. I started to tell her that was not true, that I had no idea what she was talking about. But she cut me off and said she did not want to hear excuses, not tonight. I tried to stay calm because I genuinely believed this was some kind of misunderstanding that we could talk through like adults. I told her I never had any romantic contact with Nathan, that I barely even spoke to him outside of group hangouts, and that if he said something to her about me, it was news to me. Danielle just stared at me with this expression that was almost amused, like I was a child telling an obvious lie. She pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots of old messages, conversations between her and Nathan from 2014, where he mentioned my name multiple times, saying things like how pretty I was and how he wished he had met me first. Reading those messages made me feel sick, not because I had done anything wrong, but because I realized Danielle had been holding on to this for almost a decade. She had saved these screenshots, carried them with her through the years, let them fester inside her head until they became something monstrous. I handed the phone back and told her I was sorry Nathan said those things, but I had no control over his feelings, and I never encouraged them. She took the phone and set it face down on the table, then asked me why I thought she had invited me here. The question hung in the air, and I did not answer because suddenly I was scared to. I looked toward the front door, calculating the distance and wondering where my car keys were. Danielle noticed and let out a small laugh, the kind that had no warmth in it at all. She said my keys were in her purse, that she had taken them when I went upstairs to settle in, just as a precaution. My heart started beating faster and I stood up from the table, trying to keep my voice steady, as I told her this was not okay, that I wanted to leave right now. She stayed seated, completely relaxed, and said the nearest town was about 15 miles away, and there were no streetlights on that road, so walking was not really an option. She said I should sit back down and finish my wine, that we still had a lot to talk about. I thought about running anyway, grabbing my bag and just going, but it was pitch black outside and I had no idea where I was. I also thought about calling someone, but my phone was upstairs and the signal was barely functional. So I sat back down, my pulse pounding in my ears, and waited to see what she would do next. Danielle started talking again, but her voice had changed, slower and more deliberate, like she had rehearsed this speech many times before. She told me that after Nathan broke up with her, she spiraled into a depression that lasted years. She dropped out of school, moved back in with her parents, and spent most of her mid-20s going through different medications and therapists trying to feel normal again. She said she lost friends, jobs, relationships, all because she could never get over what happened. And the whole time she kept tabs on me through social media, watching me graduate, get a job, go on vacations, smile in photos with people who loved me. She said it was like watching someone live the life that was stolen from her. I wanted to tell her that none of that was my fault, that I had my own struggles she never saw, but I knew it would not matter. In her mind, I was the villain of her story, and nothing I said was going to change that. She had built an entire narrative around me being the reason her life fell apart, and this weekend was supposed to be some kind of reckoning. She stood up and walked to the kitchen counter, opening a drawer and pulling out a small notebook with a worn cover. She brought it back to the table and flipped through the pages, showing me entries dated over several years, all of them about me. Some were just observations, things I had posted online or updates about my life she had gathered from mutual acquaintances. Others were more disturbing, long paragraphs about how I had ruined her chance at happiness and how she fantasized about making me understand her pain. There were pages where she had written my name over and over, surrounded by words like liar and thief and someday. I felt my whole body go cold reading those pages, realizing that this was not a spontaneous breakdown or a momentary lapse in judgment. Danielle had been planning something for years, keeping this journal like a countdown to a moment she had been waiting for. I asked her what she wanted from me, what would make this stop, and she closed the notebook and looked at me with something close to pity. She said she just wanted me to stay and listen, that was all. Just stay and listen until she was finished. The next few hours were the longest of my life. Danielle talked and talked, going through every grievance she had collected over the years, every perceived slight and injustice she blamed me for. She brought up things I had completely forgotten, a comment I made at a party in 2013, a photo I was tagged in with Nathan in the background, a birthday message I sent her that she thought was insincere. She dissected each one like evidence in a trial, explaining how they proved I was a manipulative person who had sabotaged her on purpose. I sat there and listened because I did not know what else to do, nodding when she seemed to want acknowledgement and staying quiet when her voice got louder. At some point around midnight, she started crying, these deep sobs that shook her whole body, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Then she wiped her face and looked at me with red eyes and said this was good, that she felt lighter already, that she had needed to say all of this to my face for so long. She thanked me for coming, like I had done her a favor, like this was a normal interaction between two old friends catching up. Around 2 in the morning, she said she was tired and wanted to go to bed. She told me I could sleep in the room upstairs, that we would talk more in the morning, and then she walked to her bedroom and closed the door. I heard a lock click from the inside. I sat on that couch for maybe 20 minutes, not moving, just trying to process what had happened. Then I went to her purse as quietly as I could and found my keys exactly where she said they would be. I grabbed my bag from upstairs, skipping every step that had creaked earlier, and I left through the back door in the kitchen because I was afraid the front door would make too much noise. I ran to my car in the dark, got in and drove away without turning on my headlights until I reached the main road. I did not stop until I hit a gas station about 40 minutes later, and that is when I finally let myself break down. I never heard from Danielle again after that night. I blocked her on everything, changed my phone number, and told a few close friends what happened in case she ever tried to contact them. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed until morning, what the next part of her plan was. I try not to think about it too much, but every now and then I wake up at 2 in the morning and remember the sound of that lock clicking shut, and I cannot fall back asleep. After my 10-year high school reunion got canceled in 2018, I decided to reach out to some people I had lost touch with. I was working as an electrician in Knoxville, Tennessee, living in a small apartment near the river, spending most of my free time either fishing or playing video games alone. My graduating class had scattered across the country, and social media made it easy to see who got married, who had kids, who was doing well. But there was one name I kept searching for that never showed up anywhere: Colton Price. We had been inseparable from 7th grade through graduation, the kind of friendship where you finish each other's sentences, and share secrets you would never tell anyone else. He was the best man at my wedding, even though that marriage only lasted 2 years. Then sometime around 2014, Colton fell into something bad. Prescription pills at first, then harder stuff. I tried to help. His family tried to help, but he pushed everyone away. One day, he just vanished. No phone, no address, no trace. His mom told me she had given up hope of ever seeing him again. So when I got a message from an account with his name on it in late September, I stared at my phone for a solid 5 minutes before responding. The profile picture was blank, just a gray silhouette, and the message itself was strange. It said, "Hey brother, I'm back. Would love to catch up if you're open to it. I'm in a much better place now." No explanation of where he had been for 4 years, no apology for disappearing, nothing about what happened, just those 3 short sentences. I typed back immediately, my heart pounding in my chest, asking if it was really him and where he had been. His response came almost an hour later, and it was just as minimal. "It's me. Can we meet? I have so much to share with you." Something about the phrasing struck me as odd, like it was written by someone who had learned English as a second language. But I chalked it up to my own paranoia. This was Colton, my best friend. Of course I wanted to see him. We agreed to meet at a diner off Chapman Highway, a place we used to go after football games back in high school. I got there early, grabbed a booth by the window and ordered coffee I did not really want, just to have something to do with my hands. The waitress was an older woman with a name tag that said Doris, and she kept refilling my cup without asking, which I appreciated because it gave me an excuse to keep looking at the door. Colton walked in exactly at 7, not a minute early or late, which was strange because the Colton I knew had never been on time for anything in his life. He used to joke that he would probably be late to his own funeral. But there he was, standing in the doorway, scanning the room with this slow mechanical movement of his head, like a security camera panning across a parking lot. When his eyes found me, he smiled, but it was not the smile I remembered. It was too wide, too symmetrical, like someone had taught him how to arrange his face into that expression, and he was following the instructions precisely. He slid into the booth across from me, and the first thing I noticed was how clean he looked. Not just sober, but scrubbed, polished, like he had been pressure washed and reassembled. His hair was cut short and neat, his skin was clear, his clothes were plain but spotless, a white button-down shirt tucked into khaki pants. He looked like someone going to a job interview at a bank. The Colton I remembered wore band t-shirts with holes in them and had a tattoo of a snake wrapped around his forearm that he got when we were 19. The tattoo was still there. I could see the tail of it peeking out from under his sleeve, but everything else about him seemed like a different person. He reached across the table and grabbed my hand, squeezing it hard, and said, "It is so good to see you, brother." His voice was flat, monotone, like he was reading from a script. I asked him where he had been, what happened, if he was okay. He just kept smiling that strange, wide smile and said, "I found something that saved my life. I want to share it with you." I tried to get him to explain what he meant, but every time I asked a direct question, he would deflect with these vague phrases that sounded rehearsed. The path revealed itself to me. I was lost, but now I am found. Everything happens according to the design. It was like talking to a customer service recording, pleasant and empty. When I asked about specific things like where he was living or what he did for work, he would pause for exactly 2 seconds before answering. I started counting after a while because it was so consistent. 2 seconds of silence, then an answer that never quite matched the question. He said he lived with his family now, but when I asked if he meant his parents, he shook his head slowly and said, "My real family, the ones who understand." His eyes never left my face while he talked, and I realized at some point that he had not blinked once since sitting down. I told myself I was imagining it, but I started watching for it, and I swear, he went a full 15 minutes without blinking. It made my own eyes water just looking at him. The strangest part was when Doris came over to take our order. Colton had not looked at the menu once, and when she asked what he wanted, He just stared at her for a long moment without responding. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, clearly uncomfortable, and asked again if he needed a minute. He turned to me and said, "Order for me, brother. You know what I like." But I did not know what he liked anymore. The Colton I knew would have ordered a bacon cheeseburger with extra pickles and a chocolate milkshake. Same thing every time. I ordered that for him, and when the food came, he did not touch it. He just sat there with his hands folded on the table, watching me eat my own meal with that unblinking stare. I asked if something was wrong with the food, and he said, "I do not need to eat right now. I am sustained." I laughed because I thought he was joking, making fun of some health trend or fad diet, but his expression did not change at all. He was completely serious. I pushed my plate away, my appetite suddenly gone, and asked him point blank what was going on with him. That was when his face changed for the first time. The smile disappeared, and something harder took its place. A tightness around his jaw that I recognized from years ago, from the few times I had seen him truly angry. He leaned forward across the table, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You are asking the wrong questions. You are looking at the surface when you should be looking beneath." I told him I did not understand what he meant, and he grabbed my wrist hard enough that I felt the bones grind together. His grip was incredibly strong, way stronger than I remembered, and his fingers were cold even though the diner was warm. "They told me you would resist at first. They said you were not ready. But I know you, brother. I know the emptiness you carry. I know the hole inside you that nothing can fill. We can fill it. We can make you whole." I pulled my arm back and he let go, but he kept staring at me with this intensity that made me want to look away. I asked who they were. He smiled again, but this time it was different, smaller, almost secretive. "Soon," he said. "When you are ready, I will take you to meet them." I should have walked away right then. I should have thrown some cash on the table, told him to get help, and never looked back. But this was Colton, my best friend since we were 12 years old. The guy who held my hand at my dad's funeral when I was 17, who let me sleep on his couch for 3 weeks after my divorce, who knew things about me that I had never told another living soul. I could not just abandon him, not when he was clearly mixed up in something bad. So I agreed to meet him again, thinking maybe I could figure out what was happening. Maybe I could help him the way I failed to help him when the drugs took over. We set a time for the following Saturday, same place, and he stood up from the booth without another word. He walked out of the diner and I watched him through the window, expecting him to get into a car or walk toward the bus stop. Instead, he just stood on the sidewalk, perfectly still, facing away from me. A white van pulled up about a minute later, unmarked, no windows in the back. The side door slid open and Colton climbed in without hesitation, like he had done it 1,000 times before. The van drove away and I sat there in that booth for another hour, trying to convince myself that what I had just witnessed was normal. The week between our meetings was one of the longest of my life. I could not stop thinking about Colton, about the way he talked, the way he moved, the emptiness behind his eyes. I started researching online, typing things like "friend joined a cult" and signs of brainwashing into search engines at 2 in the morning when I could not sleep. The articles I found described exactly what I had seen. The rehearsed phrases, the emotional flatness, the use versus them mentality, the mysterious family that replaced all previous relationships. Some of these groups targeted addicts specifically, people who were already broken and desperate, people who would do anything to escape the pain they were in. They offered structure, purpose, belonging. They offered to fill the hole. And once they had you, they did not let go. I thought about calling his mom, warning her that he was back but that something was seriously wrong, but I did not know what I would even say. "Your son is alive, but he talks like a robot and got picked up by a windowless van." She would think I was crazy. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe Colton had just found religion or gotten really into meditation or something, and I was making it into something sinister because I felt guilty for not saving him from the drugs. Saturday came and I drove back to the diner, my stomach churning the whole way. Colton was already there when I arrived, sitting in the same booth, wearing the exact same clothes as before, the white button-down and khaki pants. I wondered if he owned anything else, or if this was some kind of uniform. He smiled when he saw me, that wide mechanical smile, and gestured for me to sit down. This time he had brought something with him, a small leather-bound book that he placed on the table between us. The cover was blank, no title or author, just worn brown leather that looked like it had been handled by many hands over many years. He pushed it toward me and said, "This will help you understand. This is how it began for me." I picked it up and flipped through the pages. The text inside was handwritten, dense paragraphs in tiny, careful script, but the words did not make sense. They were English words arranged in patterns that almost formed sentences but kept sliding away from meaning, like trying to read in a dream. There were diagrams too, circles within circles, arrows pointing inward, stick figures arranged in geometric formations. I asked Colton what this was supposed to be. He reached across the table and closed the book gently, his hand resting on mine. "You are not ready to read it yet. You need to hear it first. You need to hear him speak." I asked who him was, and Colton's eyes lit up in a way I had not seen since we were teenagers, this sudden spark of genuine emotion breaking through the flatness. "The guide," he said, and the way he pronounced those two words made them sound capitalized, sacred. "He found me when I was dying. I was living under a bridge in Nashville, shooting anything I could get my hands into my veins, waiting for my heart to finally give out. And he came to me. He sat with me in the dirt and the filth, and he told me that my suffering had a purpose, that I had been broken so I could be rebuilt, that everything I had lost was just preparation for what I would gain." Colton's voice had changed while he spoke, becoming more animated, more like the person I remembered. But there was something underneath it that scared me, a fervor that reminded me of the old street preachers who used to stand on corners downtown screaming about the end of the world. I asked what this guide wanted from him. Colton tilted his head slightly, like a dog hearing a strange sound. "He does not want anything from me. He gives. He only gives. He gave me clarity, purpose, family, and now he wants me to give those things to you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "There is a gathering tomorrow night. Come with me. Just listen. If you do not feel anything, I will never ask you again." I took the paper without thinking, some automatic reflex from years of accepting things that Colton handed me. It was an address, handwritten in the same careful script as the book, somewhere out in Sevier County near the foothills of the Smokies. Below the address was a time, 9 at night, and below that a single sentence: "Come with an empty vessel and leave with purpose." I looked up at Colton and saw something I had not noticed before, a small scar on the side of his neck, right below his ear. It was pale and perfectly circular, about the size of a cigarette burn, and when I looked closer I could see that it was not alone. There were more of them, a line of identical circles disappearing under his collar, evenly spaced like buttons. I asked him what happened to his neck, and the spark in his eyes vanished instantly, replaced by that flat, empty stare. "Proof of commitment," he said. "Proof that the body is just a container." He stood up from the booth, tucking the leather book back into his jacket. "Tomorrow night, I will be waiting outside at 9. Do not be late, brother." He walked out of the diner and I watched him climb into the same white van that had been idling in the parking lot the entire time we talked, its engine running, someone behind the tinted windshield I could not see. I did not go to the gathering. I sat in my apartment that Sunday night with all the lights on, staring at the folded piece of paper on my kitchen table, watching the clock tick past 9. Part of me wanted to go, wanted to understand what had happened to my friend, wanted to believe that maybe I could pull him out of whatever this was. But a bigger part of me knew that was exactly what they were counting on. That was how it worked. They send someone you love, someone you trust, someone you would follow anywhere, and they use that connection to reel you in. I thought about Colton sitting in that parking lot, waiting for me in the van, watching the road for my headlights. I thought about him going back inside and telling them that I did not show up, that I was not ready yet, that they needed to try a different approach. Around midnight, I got a text from his number, just 3 words. "You will come." Not a question, not even really a statement, a certainty. I blocked the number and sat there in the dark for a long time, thinking about all the ways I had failed him over the years, all the moments I could have done something differently, all the choices that led us both to this point. The next morning, I called his mother. I told her everything, the meetings, the van, the scars, the book, the gathering I did not attend. She was quiet for a long time after I finished, and when she finally spoke, her voice was thick with tears. She said she had gotten a letter from Colton about a month before he contacted me, handwritten, telling her that he was alive and well, and that he had found his true family. She said the handwriting was his, but the words were not, like someone had dictated exactly what to say. She had hired a private investigator, spent thousands of dollars she did not have, but they could not find anything. No address, no employment records, no trace of where he was living or who he was with. The investigator told her that groups like this were careful, that they moved around, that they kept their members isolated and dependent. He said the best thing she could do was wait and hope that someday Colton would find his way back on his own. I gave her the address from the piece of paper, even though I knew it was probably useless, probably just a temporary location they had already abandoned. She thanked me and hung up, and I never heard from her again. It has been 6 years since those meetings at the diner. I moved to a different city, changed my phone number, deleted all my social media accounts. Not because I was afraid of Colton finding me, though maybe I was a little, but because I could not stand the idea of getting another message like that first one. Another gray silhouette profile picture asking me to catch up. I think about him sometimes, especially late at night when sleep will not come. I wonder if he is still out there somewhere, still wearing that white button-down shirt, still waiting in parking lots for people who used to love him. I wonder if he ever thinks about who he was before, if there is any part of the real Colton left underneath all those layers of whatever they put into his head. A few months ago, I saw a news story about a compound in rural Georgia that got raided by federal agents, some kind of labor trafficking operation disguised as a religious community. The footage showed people in identical white shirts being led out in handcuffs, their faces blank and confused, like they had just woken up from a long, dreamless sleep. I paused the video and studied every face, looking for one I recognized. Colton was not there. Part of me was relieved. Part of me wished he had been, because at least then I would know where he was. At least then there would be a chance someone could help him. But mostly I just felt tired, this deep exhaustion that has never really gone away. I lost my best friend twice, first to the drugs, and then to something worse. And the hardest part, the thing that keeps me up at night, is knowing that he is still out there somewhere, still breathing, still walking around with my phone number memorized in his head, and that someday, maybe tomorrow, or maybe 10 years from now, I might get another message asking me to come back, asking me to listen, telling me that I will come, and I do not know if I will be strong enough to say no again. Around my 10-year high school reunion, I got a Facebook message from Brandon Kelly. We had been decent friends back in the day, sat next to each other in chemistry, played on the same basketball team sophomore year. After graduation, he went down a rough path, got into drugs, did some time for possession, the whole thing. His name would come up occasionally when old classmates gossiped about who made it and who didn't. So when I saw his message pop up, I almost ignored it. But something made me click. He told me he had gotten clean, found Jesus, started his own little business. The profile picture showed a different person than I remembered. Healthier, smiling, standing next to a modest sedan like he was proud of it. I figured everyone deserves a second chance. We agreed to grab coffee that Saturday, catch up like normal people do. I had no idea that one decision would cost me everything I spent years building. We met at a diner off Route 9, one of those places with sticky menus and bottomless coffee. Brandon looked good, genuinely good. He had put on some healthy weight, his eyes were clear, and he talked about his daughter like she was the center of his universe. He showed me pictures on his phone, a little girl named Kaylee, maybe 4 years old, with his exact same smile. For the first hour, we just talked about life. I told him about my job doing IT support for a medical billing company. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the mortgage. He listened, nodded, asked real questions. Then he started telling me about this side hustle he had going. Said he was buying stuff online, electronics, brand name clothes, household items, and flipping them for profit on different platforms. Nothing crazy, just arbitrage. He made it sound like everyone was doing it, like it was just being smart with money. He asked if I wanted in on it, said he could show me the ropes. The extra cash would help, he said, and my car needed new brakes and my credit card balance was getting out of control. I said I would think about it. By the end of that week, I had already joined the private Discord server he sent me. The Discord had maybe 40 people in it, all using usernames instead of real names. Brandon was FlipKing499, and he told me to pick something generic, so I went with Midwest Grind. The setup seemed legit at first. People would post deals they found, a pallet of returned merchandise from a big retailer going for pennies on the dollar, limited edition sneakers dropping at specific times, electronics with pricing errors that you could snag before the company fixed it. The idea was simple: buy low, sell high, repeat. Brandon walked me through my first flip in a private voice chat. We bought a batch of Bluetooth speakers from a liquidation site for about $80 total, then listed them individually on 3 different marketplaces. Within 2 weeks, I made almost $300 profit. It felt like free money. I remember telling my wife Amy about it, showing her the PayPal balance on my phone. She was skeptical but happy. We used that first profit to finally fix the brakes on my car. That felt like proof that this whole thing was real, that Brandon had actually figured something out. For the next couple months, everything ran smooth. I was making an extra $500, sometimes $800 a month just working a few hours after my regular job. The Discord group had rules. No talking about the server outside of it, no screenshots, no inviting anyone without approval from the admins. Brandon said it was just to protect the deals, keep the competition low. Made sense to me. I got to know some of the regulars through text chat. There was a guy called Texas Toast who claimed to be a former accountant, and a woman named Sparkle Mom, who said she was a single mother of 3 just trying to make ends meet. We shared tips, celebrated wins, complained about shipping costs. It felt like a little community. Brandon and I started talking almost every day, sometimes about business, sometimes just life stuff. He told me about his struggles with sobriety, how his ex barely let him see Kaylee, how this reselling thing had given him purpose. I believed every word. I wanted to believe it, because if Brandon could turn his life around like that, maybe there was hope for anyone. Maybe I was helping him stay on the right path just by being his friend again. Things started shifting around month 4. Brandon messaged me late one night, said he had access to something bigger. A contact who worked at a distribution center was willing to sell inventory lists before they went public. Not the products themselves, just information about what was coming, when, and at what price points. Brandon said it was like insider trading but for retail goods. He laughed when he typed it, added a bunch of crying, laughing emojis. I asked if it was legal and he said it was a gray area, that corporations did way worse every single day. The first time we used the list, we made over $2,000 in a single weekend. I deposited the money into a separate checking account I had opened just for the side business. Amy noticed I was spending more time on my laptop at night, but I told her work was busy. That was my first real lie to her about any of this. It sat in my stomach like a rock, but then I looked at the account balance and convinced myself it was worth it. We were saving for a house. This was going to get us there faster. The gray areas kept getting darker. By month 6, Brandon introduced me to a method he called return cycling. The concept was simple but ugly. You buy an expensive item with a credit card, swap it with a cheaper knockoff or broken unit, then return the fake as if it was the original, and get your money back while keeping the real product to sell. Brandon assured me the big box stores wrote off this kind of loss as routine shrinkage, that nobody got hurt because they were insured for it. I told him I was not comfortable doing that myself. He said fine, no pressure, but he needed someone to help him list the items online since he was getting overwhelmed. So, I became his seller. I would receive packages at my house, photograph the products, write the descriptions, handle the shipping. I told myself I was just doing logistics. I was not the one committing the fraud. But deep down, I knew that was a lie too. Every time I printed a shipping label, I felt this tightness in my chest that would not go away. I started having trouble sleeping. Amy asked me if something was wrong and I snapped at her. Told her to stop asking questions. That was the moment I should have walked away. I still think about that almost every day. Around month 8, the Discord server started getting paranoid. One of the regulars, a guy who went by Ohio Hustle, stopped posting out of nowhere. A few days later, someone said they heard he got a visit from postal inspectors asking about packages. Brandon told everyone to stay calm, said Ohio Hustle was probably sloppy with his methods, and that the rest of us were fine as long as we followed protocol. But the vibe in the group changed after that. People started deleting old messages, changing their usernames, talking about VPNs and encrypted apps. Brandon moved our private conversations to Signal and told me to delete our entire text history. I did it without questioning him. Looking back, that blind obedience terrifies me more than anything else. I had become so deep in this thing that I just did whatever he said. He could have told me to drive a package across state lines, and I probably would have done it. That is not who I was before any of this. I was the guy who returned extra change when a cashier made a mistake. I was the guy who reminded coworkers to log their overtime so they would get paid correctly. Somewhere along the way, Brandon had turned me into someone I did not recognize. Then came the day everything collapsed. It was a Thursday morning in late spring, one of those perfect days where the sun is warm, but there is still a cool breeze. I was working from home, sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop, when I heard a hard knock at the front door. Not a normal knock, the kind that sounds like authority. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 people in plain clothes holding badges. My legs went weak and I had to grab the wall to keep myself upright. They identified themselves as investigators with the Postal Service and asked if I was willing to answer some questions. I let them in because I thought refusing would make me look guilty. They sat on my couch, the same couch where Amy and I watched movies on weekends, and they started asking me about packages, specific tracking numbers, specific dates. They had a folder with printouts of listings that I had created, screenshots of product descriptions I had written with my own hands. One of them asked me how I knew Brandon Kelly. I said he was an old friend from high school. The other one nodded slowly and wrote something down in a small notebook. They asked if I would be willing to come down to their office for a more formal interview. I said I needed to talk to a lawyer first. They left me a business card and walked out. The whole conversation lasted maybe 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. The second they drove away, I grabbed my phone and called Brandon. Straight to voicemail. I texted him on Signal. Nothing. I checked the Discord server and got an error message saying the server no longer existed. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I tried his regular number, his Facebook, even his email. Everything was dead or unanswered. I drove to the last address I had for him, an apartment complex on the east side of town, and the landlord told me he had moved out 3 days earlier. Paid his last month in cash, did not leave a forwarding address. 3 days. That meant Brandon knew something was coming before the investigators even showed up at my door. He had planned this. He had time to disappear while I was still sitting at home thinking everything was fine. I sat in my car in that apartment parking lot for almost an hour, just staring at the building, trying to understand how someone I trusted could do this. We had talked almost every day for nearly a year. He told me about his daughter, his recovery, his dreams. Was any of it real? Or was I just a useful idiot from the very beginning? Someone with a clean record and a stable address who could be the face of his operation while he stayed in the shadows. That night I finally told Amy everything. We sat at the kitchen table and I laid it all out. The discord, the flips, the return fraud, the investigators. She did not yell or cry. She just looked at me with this expression I had never seen before, like she was looking at a stranger. After I finished talking, she was quiet for a long time. Then she asked me one question. Why did I not tell her sooner? I did not have a good answer. I said I thought I was protecting her, that I did not want her to worry. But the truth was, I was ashamed. I knew what I was doing was wrong and I did not want to see that judgment in her eyes. She slept in the guest room that night. I stayed up until 4 in the morning going through every email, every file, every transaction, trying to piece together just how exposed I really was. The answer was bad. My name was on shipping labels, on marketplace accounts, on the checking account where all the money flowed through. Brandon had been careful to keep himself one step removed from everything. The packages came to my house. The accounts were registered with my information. If anyone was going to take the fall for this, it was me. I hired a lawyer the next day, a woman named Christine who specialized in federal cases. She was not cheap, but she was direct, which I appreciated. After reviewing everything I had, she told me the situation was serious but not hopeless. The investigators were building a case against a network, not just me. If I cooperated fully and could demonstrate that Brandon was the one running the operation, there was a chance I could avoid the worst outcomes. She used words like accessory and conspiracy and plea negotiation, and each one landed like a punch to the gut. I spent the next 3 months living in a constant state of anxiety. Every time the phone rang, I thought it was the investigators calling to arrest me. Every time a car slowed down near my house, I thought they were coming to take me away. I lost 15 pounds because I could barely eat. Amy and I started couples counseling, but something between us had broken. She looked at me differently now, like she was always waiting for the next lie. I do not blame her. I had become someone who could look her in the eyes and hide an entire secret life. The man she married would never have done that, but I did, and no amount of apologizing could undo it. It has been almost 2 years since that Thursday morning when the investigators knocked on my door. I ended up taking a deal: probation, a fine community service, and a felony on my record that will follow me for the rest of my life. I lost my job when the background check flagged my case during a routine audit. Amy and I are still together, but we are not the same. Some days are better than others. Brandon was never found, at least not that I know of. Christine told me the investigators believed he had done this before in other states, using other people like me. A pattern of finding someone vulnerable, building trust, then disappearing when the heat came. I think about him sometimes, wonder where he is, if he is running the same scheme on some other desperate person right now. But mostly I think about myself, about how easily I let it happen. I wanted to believe people could change. I wanted to believe that extra money would solve my problems. I wanted to believe I was just helping a friend, and that wanting, that desperate need to believe in something good, is exactly what he used against me. Trust is supposed to be a gift you give to people who earn it. I learned the hard way that some people see it as nothing more than a door you leave unlocked. Sometimes your past finds you in the most ordinary places. Mine found me at the frozen foods section of a grocery store in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, on a Wednesday afternoon in late September 2024. I had just turned 34 the month before. My daughter Molly had made me a lopsided cake with too much frosting, and my husband Jack had surprised me with a weekend trip to Chicago that we still had not taken. Life was good, predictable, safe. I worked as a dental hygienist at a family practice downtown, drove a Subaru Outback with Cheerios permanently embedded in the back seats, and had not thought about Ridgemont High School or the people I knew there in what felt like a lifetime. I was reaching for a bag of frozen peas when I heard a voice behind me that made every muscle in my body tense up before my brain could even process why. Maggie Dalton. Or I guess it's Maggie Thornton now, right? The voice was deeper than I remembered, rougher around the edges, but I knew exactly who it belonged to before I turned around. Shelby Crane stood there in the frozen aisle, her dirty blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing a faded denim jacket that looked like it had seen better days about a decade ago. She had aged in that hard way that tells you life had not been gentle. Deep lines around her mouth, a scar on her chin that was not there before, eyes that seemed simultaneously tired and too alert. We had been inseparable once, back in 9th and 10th grade, the kind of friendship that burns hot and fast during those years when everything feels like life or death. Then something happened between us, something we never spoke about again, and I had spent the last 18 years making sure our paths never crossed. Yet here she was, smiling at me with a warmth that did not quite reach her eyes, blocking my path to the checkout lanes. "Shelby," I managed to say, and I hated how my voice came out thin and uncertain. "Wow, it's been a long time." She stepped closer and I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke mixed with something floral, maybe jasmine, a combination that instantly transported me back to her childhood bedroom, where we used to stay up all night talking about boys and planning futures that never materialized. She was studying my face like she was looking for something specific, cataloging every detail, and it made me want to take a step backward into the freezer case behind me. I clutched the bag of frozen peas against my chest like some kind of pathetic shield. My mind was racing through calculations. How did she find me? Was this a coincidence? Did she know I lived here now? Had she been looking for me? Cedar Rapids was not exactly a small town, but it was not Chicago either. Running into someone from my past, someone from that specific chapter of my past, felt too precise to be random chance. 18 years, Shelby said, nodding slowly like she'd been counting every single one of them. "You look good, Maggie, real good. Got the whole suburban mom thing going on, huh? Saw the ring, the sensible car in the parking lot. You did exactly what you always said you would do. Got out, made something normal." There was an edge to the way she said normal that I did not like, a slight curl of her lip that suggested judgment or maybe jealousy. I could not tell which. She reached out and touched my arm, her fingers cold even through my sweater, and I noticed her nails were bitten down to the quick, the cuticles ragged and raw. "Listen, I did not track you down to make small talk about the glory days or whatever. I need to talk to you about something important, something we both need to discuss before it's too late." The fluorescent lights above us flickered once, and in that brief stutter of light and shadow, Shelby's face looked almost skeletal, desperate in a way that frightened me more than I wanted to admit. I suggested we go somewhere to talk, mostly because I did not want to have whatever conversation this was going to be in the middle of a grocery store where any of my neighbors or co-workers might walk by. We ended up at a coffee shop 3 blocks away, one of those places with exposed brick and mismatched furniture that tried too hard to feel authentic. I ordered a latte I did not want just to have something to do with my hands, and Shelby got black coffee that she proceeded to not drink, just wrapped her fingers around the cup like she was trying to absorb its warmth. For a few minutes we sat in silence, and I watched her eyes dart around the room, checking the exits, studying the other customers, never settling on any one thing for more than a second or two. She looked like a person waiting for something bad to happen, like someone who had grown accustomed to bad things happening, and now expected them as a matter of course. I remembered her as fearless once, the girl who would climb the water tower on a dare, who talked back to teachers and snuck out of her house almost every weekend. This version of Shelby was something else entirely. "Do you remember Kaylee Barton?" Shelby finally asked, and the name hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Of course I remembered Kaylee Barton. I had spent 18 years trying to forget Kaylee Barton, trying to convince myself that what happened was not as bad as my memory insisted it was, that we were just kids doing stupid kid things, and nobody was really responsible. Kaylee had been a sophomore when we were freshmen, a quiet girl with thick glasses and a stutter that got worse when she was nervous. She wore the same 3 sweaters in rotation and always ate lunch alone in the library. She was exactly the kind of target that cruel teenagers zero in on, and Shelby and I had been cruel teenagers, desperate to climb whatever invisible social ladder existed at Ridgemont High. I did not answer Shelby's question, but my face must have told her everything she needed to know, because she nodded slowly and leaned forward across the table, lowering her voice to barely above a whisper. "They found her, Maggie. Last month, some hikers up near Blackhawk County found remains in a ravine about 2 miles from where we left her that night. Took the medical examiner a few weeks to identify the body, but they did. Dental records." Shelby's voice was flat, clinical, like she was reciting facts from a news report rather than describing something we had been part of. My mind was spinning, trying to reconcile what she was saying with the story I had told myself for almost 2 decades. We had left Kaylee at the abandoned Mercer farmhouse that night. Sure, it was supposed to be a prank, a stupid hazing ritual that some of the older kids had dared us to pull off. We told Kaylee there was a party out there, drove her 20 miles outside of town, and then we left her. Just left her in the dark, in the middle of nowhere, with no phone and no way to get home. I remembered her face in the rearview mirror as we drove away, illuminated by our taillights, her mouth open in a scream I could not hear through the closed windows. But she was supposed to have walked home. She was supposed to have been fine. That is what I told myself every time the memory surfaced uninvited. "That's not possible," I heard myself say. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew how hollow they sounded. She made it home. Her parents reported her missing like 3 days later, remember? She ran away. Everyone said she ran away. Shelby let out a short, bitter laugh that had no humor in it whatsoever. She pulled out her phone and slid it across the table to me, and I found myself looking at a news article from a local Iowa paper dated 3 weeks ago. The headline read, "Remains found in Blackhawk County identified as missing teen from 2006. There was a school photo of Kaylee, the same awkward smile and thick glasses I remembered, frozen forever at 15 years old. The article mentioned the ongoing investigation, the cold case unit that had been assigned, the renewed calls for anyone with information to come forward. I read the words, but they seemed to float above the screen, refusing to settle into anything that made sense. Kaylee Barton had not run away. Kaylee Barton had died out there in the dark, alone and terrified, and we were the ones who put her there. "The cops have been asking around," Shelby continued, watching my face carefully as I processed the news article. "They talked to me last week, showed up at my apartment in Des Moines. 2 detectives with badges and that look they get when they think they already know the answers. Asked me about that night, about who Kaylee hung out with, if I remembered anything unusual from back then. Someone talked, Maggie. Someone from school remembered seeing us with her that day, remembered that we were the ones who invited her to the party that never existed." She paused and took a sip of her cold coffee, grimacing at the taste. "I did not tell them anything, played dumb, said I barely remembered Kaylee, that high school was a blur. But they are going to come for you too. It's only a matter of time before they connect the dots, start pulling at threads." Her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach clench. "We need to get our stories straight. We need to figure out what we are going to say, make sure there are no contradictions. If we stick together on this, if our versions match up perfectly, they cannot prove anything. It will just be rumors and speculation, nothing that would hold up in court." I pushed my chair back from the table, suddenly feeling like the walls of the coffee shop were closing in around me. The other customers seemed too close now, their conversations too loud, and I could not shake the paranoid thought that someone might be listening to us, recording every word. "Shelby, what exactly are you asking me to do?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, edged with something between fear and anger. "You want me to lie to the police? To cover up what we did?" She reached across the table and grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong, her bitten-down nails digging into my skin. "I am asking you to protect yourself, Maggie. To protect that nice little life you built, your husband, your daughter. Think about what happens if the truth comes out. Think about what happens to Molly if her mother goes to prison for manslaughter, or worse. We were 15 years old. We did not mean for anyone to get hurt. But you think that matters now. You think anyone is going to care about our intentions when there is a dead girl and two women who kept their mouths shut for almost 20 years? Her words burrowed into me like splinters, sharp and impossible to ignore, because she was right. She was absolutely right about what I stood to lose. We talked for another hour, going over details I had spent years trying to erase from my memory. The drive out to the Mercer farmhouse in Shelby's mom's old station wagon. The way Kaylee had been so excited, so pathetically grateful that the cool girls were finally paying attention to her. How we had laughed as we sped away, high on adrenaline and cruelty. Not thinking for a second about what might happen to a scared 15-year-old girl stranded in the middle of rural Iowa at 11 o'clock at night. Shelby had a story prepared, a neat little narrative that positioned us as bystanders rather than participants. According to her version, we had dropped Kaylee off at the farmhouse where other kids were supposed to be waiting, and we had no idea she never made it inside. No idea there was no party at all. It was thin, full of holes that any competent detective would spot immediately, but Shelby delivered it with such conviction that I almost believed it myself. By the time we left the coffee shop, the sun was setting and I had agreed to nothing, but I had not refused either. I told her I needed time to think, and she gave me a burner phone with her number programmed in, told me to contact her that way and not through any traceable means. The weight of that cheap plastic phone in my pocket felt like carrying a live grenade all the way home. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed next to Jack, listening to his steady breathing, staring at the ceiling while my mind replayed every moment of that day 18 years ago. But something else was bothering me too. Something about Shelby's story that did not quite add up. She said the police had talked to her last week, that someone from school had remembered seeing us with Kaylee. But how would anyone have remembered that specific detail after so many years? Kaylee was a loner. Nobody paid attention to her. That was the whole point. That was why we chose her. And then there was the way Shelby had found me, had known exactly where I lived, where I shopped, what car I drove. She had done research, serious research, the kind that takes time and effort. I got out of bed around 2 in the morning and went down to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and started searching. What I found made my blood turn to ice water. Shelby Crane had been arrested twice in the past 5 years, once for check fraud, once for identity theft. She had done 8 months in a county jail in Nebraska and was currently on probation. And 3 months ago, right around the time Kaylee's remains were discovered, Shelby had been named as a person of interest in an unrelated case involving the disappearance of a woman in Des Moines. The pieces started clicking together in my head with horrible clarity. Shelby was not here to protect me. She was here to use me. If we both told the same fabricated story and it fell apart, which it inevitably would, she could claim that I was the one who came up with the lie, that I had manipulated her into covering for me. She could paint herself as the reluctant accomplice, the friend who went along with my scheme out of misguided loyalty. And if the investigation into Kaylee's death went badly for her, if they started looking at her record and connecting dots, she would need someone else to take the fall. Someone with a clean record, a stable life, someone who had everything to lose and would therefore be a credible villain in whatever narrative she was constructing. I thought about that burner phone sitting in my coat pocket, probably purchased with cash, untraceable to her but absolutely traceable to me if anyone found it. I thought about how she had grabbed my wrist in the coffee shop, hard enough to leave faint bruises that were only now starting to show. Evidence. She was building evidence. The realization hit me with such force that I actually gasped out loud in my dark kitchen, and I had to grip the edge of the counter to keep myself from falling. Every word she had said to me that afternoon was a carefully placed trap, and I had walked right into it like the naive suburban mom she clearly thought I was. I did not sleep the rest of that night. When the sun came up, I made a decision that went against every instinct I had. I called in sick to work, drove Molly to school like everything was normal, and then I went to the Cedar Rapids police station. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, rehearsing what I was going to say, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. Then I walked inside and asked to speak with someone about the Kaylee Barton case. The detective who eventually sat across from me was a woman about my age named Reyes, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that somehow made everything easier. I told her everything. About the prank, about leaving Kaylee at the farmhouse, about 18 years of silence and guilt and self-deception. I told her about Shelby showing up at the grocery store, about the story she wanted me to tell, about the burner phone and the bruises on my wrist. I gave her everything I had, held nothing back, and when I was done I felt like I had been turned inside out, like every secret I had ever kept was now scattered across the table between us. Detective Reyes listened without interrupting, took notes, and when I finished she simply nodded and said they would be in touch. The next few months were the hardest of my life, but not in the way I had expected. It turned out that Shelby had been playing an even more dangerous game than I realized. When the police brought her in for questioning and confronted her with my statement, her carefully constructed story collapsed almost immediately. She tried to claim that I had been the mastermind behind the prank, that I had driven the car that night while she begged me to turn around, but there were problems with her version. Big problems. The police had already found text messages on her old phone, recovered through some kind of digital forensics I did not fully understand, that showed she had been bragging about the prank to another friend the day after it happened. Messages where she described herself as the one behind the wheel, laughing about how scared Kaylee had looked. But that was not the worst of it. During the investigation, detectives discovered that Shelby had been in contact with Kaylee's younger brother, a man named Harris, who had spent his entire adult life searching for answers about his sister. She had approached him 6 months earlier, claiming to have information, stringing him along while she figured out how to profit from the situation. She had tried to extort money from him in exchange for details about what happened that night, and when he refused to pay and threatened to go to the police, she panicked. That was when she came looking for me, not to coordinate stories, but to set up a fall guy in case everything went sideways. The prosecutor offered me a deal in exchange for my full cooperation and testimony against Shelby. I pleaded guilty to reckless endangerment, a charge that carried no prison time given my clean record, my cooperation, and the fact that I had been 15 years old when the incident occurred. I received 5 years of probation and 200 hours of community service, which I completed by volunteering at a crisis hotline for at-risk teens. Shelby was not so fortunate. Between the Kaylee Barton case, the attempted extortion of Harris Barton, and the other charges that surfaced during the investigation, she was sentenced to 12 years in state prison. I attended every day of the trial, sitting in the back row, watching the woman who had once been my best friend try to lie her way out of consequences that had been decades in the making. She never looked at me, not once, but I could not look away from her. I needed to see it through to the end. Jack and I are still together, though it took months of therapy and difficult conversations to rebuild the trust I had shattered by keeping this secret for so long. Molly knows a version of the truth now, age-appropriate but honest, and she still looks at me the same way she always did, which is more than I deserve. I think about Kaylee Barton every single day. I think about her stumbling through the dark, trying to find her way home, scared and alone because 2 girls thought her suffering would be entertaining. I cannot change what I did, cannot undo the cruelty of my 15-year-old self, but I can carry her memory forward, and I can make sure that the rest of my life means something, even if it will never be enough to balance the scales. Some debts cannot be repaid. You just learn to live with the weight of them. The reunion invitation showed up in my inbox during a stretch of my life that felt oddly suspended. Like nothing bad was happening, but nothing meaningful was either. I was in my mid-30s, working a stable job, living alone, and mostly keeping to myself after a quiet breakup earlier that year. High school felt distant, almost fictional, but curiosity pulled me in anyway. It promised familiar faces, nostalgia, and the comfort of being someone I used to be for one night. I drove to the hotel ballroom just before sunset, telling myself I'd stay an hour and leave. The parking lot was already half full, laughter spilling out whenever the doors opened. Inside, the air smelled like cheap wine and old cologne, and every conversation sounded slightly too loud. I remember thinking it felt less like a celebration and more like a checkpoint in time. Near the bar, someone said my name in a way that made it sound rehearsed, careful. Lydia stood there, smiling wide, looking almost exactly like she had back then, just sharpened by adulthood. She'd been one of those people everyone knew, the kind who floated between groups without effort. We hugged, and she commented on how easy it was to spot me across the room, which struck me as strange given how crowded it was. We started talking, and almost immediately her questions came fast and specific. Where did I work now? Did I live alone? How long had I been in the same place? She remembered details I didn't recall ever sharing, like the street I grew up on and my old locker number. Each answer I gave seemed to make her more attentive, not less. As the night went on, Lydia rarely left my side, even when others tried to pull her away. She asked about past relationships, what kind of schedule I kept, whether I still talked to anyone from our graduating class. It didn't feel like catching up. It felt like inventory. When I laughed it off or gave vague answers, she gently circled back later, rephrasing the same questions. Her eyes didn't wander when people spoke to us, and she never checked her phone. At one point, she casually mentioned she'd moved around a lot, hopping states, keeping things flexible. The way she said it carried a weight that lingered longer than the words themselves. I felt an urge to excuse myself, but politeness kept me rooted there. I stepped outside for air when the music got louder and the room thinned out, scrolling through my phone to ground myself. A local news alert popped up, one of those algorithm-fed stories tied loosely to my location. The photo stopped me cold, not because it was graphic, but because I recognized the face immediately. Lydia's name appeared beneath it, linked to an arrest warrant issued out of state for multiple violent offenses. The article mentioned she was believed to be traveling, possibly attending events connected to her past. My pulse thudded in my ears as the realization settled into place. She hadn't been reminiscing earlier that night, she'd been confirming details. I wasn't just someone she remembered, I was someone she'd been looking for. When I went back inside, the room felt rearranged, like furniture shifted while I was gone. Fewer people lingered, coats in hand, voices softer and more cautious. Lydia spotted me immediately from across the room, her attention locking in before I even reached our table. She asked if everything was all right, tilting her head in a way that suggested concern but carried no warmth. I lied without thinking, said I just needed some air. She nodded, then mentioned how late it was getting and how people always rushed off without saying goodbye. Her gaze flicked toward the exits as she spoke, as if tracking who had already left. That's when I noticed she was subtly repositioning herself between me and the main doors. I tried to keep the conversation light, while my thoughts raced ahead of my words. Every question she asked now sounded different, sharper, like it had teeth. She brought up how unsafe the world had become, how people vanished from each other's lives so easily. When she asked whether I still parked on the street or used a garage, I felt my chest tighten. I deflected, joked about how boring my routine was, but she didn't laugh. Instead, she told me she always admired how predictable I'd been in school, how reliable. It wasn't a compliment the way she delivered it. It sounded more like a classification. Around us, staff began stacking chairs, signaling the night was ending. As people filtered out, Lydia suggested we walk together to the parking lot, said it would be nice to keep talking without the noise. I declined, claiming I had a call to make, and she studied my face as if checking for cracks. Her smile returned, slower this time, and she said she'd wait. That was when I noticed a man near the coat rack watching us, someone I hadn't seen earlier. He didn't wear a name tag and never interacted with anyone else. Lydia caught me looking and casually mentioned he was an old friend too, though they never acknowledged each other directly. The implication hung heavy between us, unspoken but loud. I told Lydia I needed to use the restroom and walked straight past it toward the service hallway instead. My heart pounded, not from panic but from a sharp clarity I hadn't felt all night. I slipped out a side exit meant for staff, the cold air biting hard against my face. I didn't head for my car right away. I circled the building, staying in the shadows, listening. From across the lot, I saw Lydia step outside with the man, scanning the rows of vehicles slowly, methodically. They weren't searching randomly. They were narrowing things down. That's when I understood the reunion hadn't been a coincidence at all. I waited longer than felt reasonable before moving, counting breaths and watching their silhouettes drift apart. When Lydia walked back inside alone, I took that as my opening. I stayed low and crossed the lot between cars, choosing a route that kept me hidden from the entrance lights. I didn't unlock my car right away. The sound felt too loud in the quiet. Instead, I pulled my phone out and dialed a non-emergency line, keeping my voice steady while explaining what I'd seen and what I'd just learned. The dispatcher asked for descriptions, not names, and told me to stay where I was. I watched the doors the entire time, every shadow making my shoulders tense. 2 cruisers arrived without sirens, easing into the lot like they belonged there. I flagged one down and gave them the article, the questions, the man by the coat rack. One officer nodded slowly, eyes never leaving the building. They went inside while I stayed put, hands wrapped around my keys so tight the metal left marks. Minutes passed, then more, stretching thin. When the officers came back out, Lydia wasn't with them. They said she'd left through a different exit earlier just before closing. The man was gone too. There was no chase, no dramatic arrest, just a quiet confirmation that my instincts had been right. I drove home a different way, looping through streets I didn't normally take, checking mirrors more often than necessary. Once inside, I locked everything and sat on the floor with my back against the door until my breathing slowed. I replayed every moment of the night, every question she asked, every detail I'd handed over without thinking. The officers followed up later telling me the warrant was active and that my report helped establish her pattern. They advised changing routines, updating security, and keeping my circle informed. It felt strange hearing my life reduced to precautions, but I followed everyone. Nothing else happened after that night, at least nothing visible. No calls, no sightings, no sudden knocks. Still, I don't attend reunions anymore, and I'm careful about what parts of my past I reopen. The idea that someone could step back into your life wearing familiarity like a disguise hasn't left me. Lydia didn't recognize me because she missed me. She recognized me because she needed to. That distinction changed how I see memories and how I protect them. I share this here because I learned the hard way that sometimes being remembered isn't about connection at all. Grief has a way of shrinking your world without asking permission, and that's where my head was at during the early weeks after we lost Ben. Life had been pretty ordinary before that. Nothing dramatic, just work, errands, and the usual routines that keep days stitched together. After the funeral, those routines fell apart fast. I wasn't sleeping much, barely eating, and the apartment felt louder when it was quiet. Most of my friends checked in with quick messages, which I appreciated, but everything still felt distant, like I was watching my own life through fogged glass. That's when Caleb reached out. We hadn't spoken in years, not since drifting apart after college, but we shared a lot of history, especially with Ben. Seeing his name pop up felt strange, but also oddly comforting in that moment. Caleb started with long messages about memories, inside jokes only we would remember, details that made the loss feel real instead of abstract. He said he understood how disorienting it was, that grief didn't follow rules, and those words landed harder than I expected. Soon the messages turned into calls, sometimes late at night when the apartment felt unbearable. He listened more than he talked, letting me ramble, letting silence stretch without rushing to fill it. When I mentioned I hadn't gone grocery shopping since the funeral, he offered to drop some things off. It felt harmless, even thoughtful. A bag of food appeared at my door the next day, along with a note telling me to take care of myself. At that point, it felt like kindness, nothing more. After that, Caleb started finding small ways to be present. He offered to drive me to work when my car wouldn't start, said it gave him something to do. He reminded me about bills I might forget, sent calendar invites for things I hadn't had the energy to track. Each gesture came wrapped in concern, framed as support during a fragile time. I noticed he spoke a lot about how people disappear after funerals, how grief shows you who really stays. Hearing that while feeling isolated made his presence feel essential. He began stopping by unannounced, always apologetic, always saying he just wanted to make sure I was okay. I didn't question it then. I was too tired to set boundaries, too relieved not to be alone. The shift was subtle enough that I can't point to a single moment where alarms went off. It started with comments about my other friends, how they hadn't checked in as much, how he worried they didn't understand what I was going through. Then it turned into suggestions about decisions I should or shouldn't make while not in a good headspace. If I hesitated, he reminded me how vulnerable I was, how people could take advantage of that. The irony didn't hit me right away. He kept track of my schedule better than I did, corrected me when I remembered conversations differently, insisted he was just looking out for me. Somewhere in all that care, my days stopped feeling like mine. I began realizing that grief wasn't the only thing tightening around my life. The more Caleb stayed involved, the more my own instincts started to dull. Decisions that used to feel automatic suddenly came with a need for approval, or at least his input. If I mentioned plans, he'd ask detailed questions, then gently steer me toward what he thought was safer or smarter. He framed it as protecting me from burnout or bad choices, always tying it back to how fragile grief could make a person. When I pushed back, even lightly, he looked genuinely hurt, reminding me how much he'd stepped up when others hadn't. That guilt worked better than any argument. I began choosing silence over disagreement, telling myself it was temporary, just until things stabilized. Small boundaries I tried to rebuild didn't last long. One evening, after I said I needed a night alone, he showed up anyway, saying he'd had a bad feeling and didn't want me spiraling by myself. Another time, he went through my mail while waiting for me to get home, claiming he was worried about unpaid bills. Each time there was an explanation that sounded reasonable on the surface, wrapped in concern and familiarity. Yet I started noticing how tense my body felt whenever his car pulled up. Relief mixed with dread in a way I couldn't explain. The apartment no longer felt like a refuge, but like a shared space I hadn't agreed to share. The realization didn't arrive dramatically. It crept in during an ordinary moment, while he was talking about how dependent I'd become on his help. He said it casually, almost fondly, like it was proof he mattered. Something about that phrasing stuck with me. I replayed conversations in my head, noticed patterns I'd ignored, remembered how often my own doubts had been brushed aside. His support always came with direction. His comfort always had conditions. Grief had lowered my defenses, and he'd stepped neatly into the opening. Understanding that didn't erase the sadness, but it sharpened it, giving it edges instead of fog. Taking space felt risky, like removing a brace before a bone had healed. Still, I started small. I delayed replies, stopped sharing every detail of my day, quietly handled problems he usually jumped in to solve. The pushback came fast. He accused me of shutting him out, questioned whether I was coping as well as I thought. This time, instead of apologizing, I paid attention to how that made me feel. Not supported, not understood, but managed. That clarity hurt, but it also grounded me. For the first time since Ben's death, something felt solid again, even if it was just my resolve to take my life back. Distance changed the tone immediately. Messages from Caleb shifted from concern to irritation, then back to concern again, as if flipping a switch might pull me closer. He started referencing things I'd told him in confidence, using them as examples of why I still needed guidance. That's when I noticed how often he spoke in absolutes, how rarely he asked what I wanted. One afternoon, he suggested taking over my finances for a while, saying paperwork was dangerous territory for someone grieving. Hearing that out loud finally cut through whatever haze I was in. Care doesn't ask for control as a prerequisite. I told him no, clearly without softening it, and the silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. What came next was pressure dressed up as worry. He warned me I was isolating myself, that people in mourning often make reckless choices. When I didn't respond the way he expected, he showed up at my door again, insisting we needed to talk. I didn't open it. Instead, I spoke through the door, voice steady in a way that surprised me, and told him I needed space and that he had to respect it. He lingered outside longer than necessary, then left without another word. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks without waking up in a panic. The quiet felt earned. The following days were uncomfortable, but honest. I reached out to friends I'd drifted from, admitted I'd let one person take up too much space. No one judged me. They listened, brought meals, sat with me without agendas. I changed my routine, locked things down, and stopped sharing personal details with anyone who hadn't earned that trust. Caleb tried a few more times, alternating apologies with reminders of everything he'd done. I didn't engage. Eventually, the messages stopped. Losing that connection hurt in a different way than grief, but it was cleaner, less suffocating. Looking back, I don't think Caleb saw himself as a villain. I think he saw opportunity in my vulnerability and convinced himself it was love or loyalty. That's what makes it unsettling. Grief doesn't just attract comfort, it can attract control. The day everything shifted wasn't dramatic or loud. It was quiet, built on a decision to listen to my own unease and act on it. Ben's death cracked my life open, but it also taught me something hard and necessary. Support should help you stand on your own, not teach you how to lean forever. For most of last spring, life felt loud in a way I couldn't explain to anyone without sounding dramatic. I had just ended a long relationship, quit a job that drained me, and needed space where nobody expected updates or explanations. That's how I ended up renting a small farmhouse in a rural pocket of the state, surrounded by fields and gravel roads that barely showed up on maps. I told almost no one where I was going, not out of fear, but because I wanted the quiet to stay intact. The plan was simple: unpack slowly, reset my sleep schedule, and let my nervous system calm down. My days were meant to be repetitive in a comforting way, like morning coffee by the window and short walks down the dirt road. The house smelled faintly of old wood and dust, and the nearest neighbor was far enough away that nights felt completely still. It felt like the kind of place where nothing followed you. A few days in, I drove into the nearest town for groceries, the kind of place with one main street and a single store that sold everything from canned soup to fishing bait. The bell above the door rang when I walked in, sharp against the quiet. I was comparing prices in the cereal aisle when I heard someone say my name, not loudly, but with a certainty that made me turn around. Standing there was Rachel, someone I hadn't seen in years, wearing a denim jacket and that familiar crooked posture I recognized immediately. For a second, my brain treated it like a joke, like the town was playing tricks on me. We stared at each other longer than normal before laughing, both of us saying variations of, "What are you doing here?" She said she was just passing through and shrugged it off, like the explanation didn't matter. I left the store smiling, telling myself coincidences happen, even strange ones. After that, she kept appearing, always in places I had just started considering mine. She was at the coffee counter the next morning, already holding the blend I'd asked about the day before. Later that afternoon, I saw her car parked near the trailhead I'd discovered on my second walk, the one I hadn't mentioned to anyone. Each time she acted casual, waving first, acting like we were just two people reconnecting by chance. She commented on how peaceful the area was, how perfect it suited me, using words I'd said to no one out loud. At one point, she joked about how brave it was to disappear without telling people where you landed. I laughed with her, but the laughter felt thin, like it belonged to someone else. By evening, my routine no longer felt private, just observed. The moment everything shifted came back at the farmhouse, while I was unlocking the door at dusk. Rachel's voice came from behind me, already using the driveway like it was familiar territory. She mentioned the rental by name, corrected herself when she got the square footage wrong, then laughed it off. Then she said the date I'd arrived, exact, not guessed, as if it had been marked somewhere important. She talked about how hard it can be to really vanish, even when you think you've covered your tracks. Standing there, keys still in my hand, it clicked that this wasn't a lucky accident layered on top of another. Running into me required knowing where I'd go, when I'd arrive, and how long I planned to stay. The quiet I'd come here for hadn't been broken by chance at all. The next morning I tried to convince myself I was spiraling. Small towns recycle faces, and maybe she really did have a reason to be around. Still, I changed my routine on purpose, like a little experiment. Instead of driving into town for coffee, I made it at home and went out early to a different store 20 minutes farther, one I'd noticed on the way in but hadn't used yet. I didn't take my usual route either. I turned off onto a back road that cut through a patch of pine and dumped me near a feed supply place. I bought random things I didn't need just to justify the trip, then sat in my car for a minute with the engine off, listening. When I finally walked into the store, the air smelled like fertilizer and warm rubber. I picked up a basket, turned down the first aisle, and saw Rachel at the end cap, already looking up like she'd been waiting for me to enter the frame. She didn't act surprised. That was the detail that stuck like a burr in my head. If it was coincidence, there would have been that startled little flinch people do, the "oh wow, you too" expression. Instead, she smiled like the day had gone according to plan. She fell into step beside me and started talking about practical things, how the road to my farmhouse gets slick after rain, how the landlord tends to forget to salt the steps, how the porch light sometimes flickers if you leave it on too long. I stopped walking and asked her, as calmly as I could, how she knew all that. She laughed and said something like, "You know me, I notice stuff." But her eyes didn't match the joke. She was watching my face the way someone watches a lock they're trying to pick, patient, focused, confident they'll get it open. On the drive back, I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. A dark sedan sat in a turnout near the highway entrance, idling. It wasn't unusual by itself, but I saw it again later, parked at the edge of town, and then once more farther down the rural road that led toward my rental. Each time it was angled slightly differently, like whoever was inside understood sightlines. When I got home, I walked the perimeter of the farmhouse and found a thin strip of plastic tucked under the porch railing, like someone had torn it off a package and left it there. Near the side door, in the dirt where the grass thinned out, there were fresh shoe prints that weren't mine. Wide tread, heavy heel, deeper than you'd expect from someone just strolling past. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to make my brain accept a simple truth. I wasn't alone in my reset. That night, Rachel texted me from a number I hadn't saved. The message was short, friendly on the surface, but it read like a hand on the back of my neck. "You still doing that little evening walk around 7? I hadn't told her that. I hadn't posted it. I hadn't even said it out loud on a call. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then brightened it again, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less personal. I didn't reply. A few minutes later, another message popped up. "Don't make this weird. I'm just happy I found you." That's when I realized the scariest part wasn't that she knew where I was. It was that she thought she had the right to know. Like my attempt to disappear was something she could override with enough effort. Sleep didn't really happen after that. I stayed on the couch with the lights off, listening to the old house settle and pop, every sound suddenly meaningful. Around early morning, headlights swept across the front windows, slow and deliberate, then disappeared. I didn't move until birds started making noise outside, the normal daytime sounds returning like nothing had happened. When I checked my phone again, there was one more message from Rachel, sent while it was still dark. She wrote that she'd always been good at finding people who didn't want to be found. Said it like a skill she was proud of. There was no threat spelled out, but it didn't need one. The message carried the weight of effort, of time spent planning, of someone who had decided my quiet belonged to her too. I packed that morning without trying to be subtle. Clothes went into bags, drawers left half open, dishes stacked and forgotten. I called the landlord and told him I was leaving earlier than planned, blamed it on a family issue I didn't explain. My hands were steady, my voice surprisingly calm, like my body had already accepted the decision. Before leaving, I walked through each room one last time and noticed small things that hadn't been there when I arrived. A moved chair on the porch, a scuff on the doorframe, a faint smell of cigarette smoke that didn't belong to me. It felt like proof, even if I couldn't show it to anyone else. When I pulled out of the driveway, I didn't look back, afraid I'd see someone standing where the field met the trees. I didn't drive straight home. I took highways, changed directions twice, stopped in a crowded place just to sit and breathe around other people. Rachel texted again while I was there, asking if I'd gone somewhere, adding a sad face emoji like we were joking. I blocked the number, then blocked it again when it came through from a different one. That was the moment I understood this wasn't about coincidence or nostalgia. Reappearing in my life took coordination, access to information, patience. It meant my attempt to reset hadn't failed because I did something wrong. It failed because someone else had decided not to let me disappear. Eventually, I settled somewhere else, closer to people, louder than I wanted, but safer. Months passed without seeing her, though I still catch myself scanning stores, parking lots, reflections in glass. I don't post my location online anymore. I don't tell new people where I live until I trust them. Some days I replay that first moment in the grocery store and wonder how long she'd known I was going there, how early the plan started. I never confronted her, never got answers, and maybe that's the point. The most unsettling part isn't what she did. It's realizing how carefully it was done and how easily someone can reach into your life when they decide your privacy doesn't count.